Harbough, the Director of Curriculum Instruction and State and Federal Programs at Buffalo High School. Good evening. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Night number 2.
Yes.
A whole bunch.
Now, I'm going to let you know before I came tonight, I did a little prep. I talked to some mentors of mine, and I asked them if it would be bad form for me to have the game on my phone while I interviewed, and they said probably. The Gobles is up 13 at the half, so that's good news. I can relax.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to rush through this, so we got an hour. Go Tigers, whatever else there may be. I know you wouldn't be held tomorrow because I was protesting because I knew we weren't tomorrow.
For sure. You have a senior and I have a sophomore,
There you
so
go.
that makes a lot of sense.
That's different.
That's right.
Well, we appreciate your interest in our position. And again, we're going to do a little round robin with some questions. And get a little more pointed in some, and get some answers that everybody's kind of looking for. So, in terms of chain of command, the term chain of command generally has a negative connotation. What does it mean to you, and how do you see the chain of command working with you in the superintendent position with regard to your staff, students, parents?
Thanks. Important starting place, because to me that gets as much as anything to the role of the superintendent. I'll start by saying when you're the superintendent, the buck stops with you always. And so while chain of command, which I'll talk about, is critical for the healthy operation of a healthy organization, the buck always stops with the superintendent. No excuses, no blames, nothing else. What chain of command means to me, and what is ideal about it in a healthy organization, is that you solve problems at the lowest level. You empower people, and you support people, and you give them what they need, so that if there's an issue in the classroom, your teachers have what they need to be able to work with that child or that parent to solve the issue. And at the point where they need support, where they need help, where they need to bump it up to the next level, that then goes to perhaps an assistant principal or maybe a social worker or maybe the counselor, all the way then up through the principal to the superintendent. And of course, the superintendent, while the buck stops, is answerable to the board. Now, I myself, over the years, have brought issues to this board. And as a parent in this district, as a citizen, I've always tried to work through the chain of command. I believe that that's necessary for a healthy organization. And the most important thing that we can do is tell our people at every level, you are problem solvers. And it's your job to have the kind of relationship with our students and their families so that together you're solving problems as they come up.
Thank you. Mr. Dion, I have a question.
How are you addressing the social emotional needs of your students in your district? Are there any policies, procedures, or programs that you consider controversial?
I believe this is the second interview in a row where the word controversial has been part of your question. And so I really want to make sure I understand what you're asking. So how am I supporting that? Well, given that you probably have some knowledge with your work in Pawpaw, but for others who don't. When I came to Pawpaw, now this is my 3rd year there, one of the things that we made as a priority is a thing called whole child education. And what that means is everybody, all hands on deck, is involved in the welfare of every child. So the first year I was in Pawpaw, I held a meeting and I invited the hospital, community mental health, the police, I invited other healthcare workers in the community, I invited community and civic leaders, and we got everybody together in a room. And I said, based on the data, here are the issues facing Pawpaw students. Whether it was drugs, alcohol, tobacco use, decisions around sexual decision-making, other things that affect the health and vibrancy of our children. And we started that within months of my arriving in Pawpaw. Now, that effort has continued and now includes social emotional learning. And it was really the natural outgrowth. But when social emotional learning was brought to Pawpaw, we're using a program called Trails, and it's a program that after my interview on Tuesday came up in a lot of Facebook posts on Wednesday here in this district. There's a lot of misunderstanding about that, which I want to address. So what began as whole child education and then became a heavy focus on the emotional and social well-being of our children through the COVID pandemic. For those of you that haven't had a chance to see or don't know, I hosted a series of parent chats once a month. And what we would do is we would invite parents to come and we would have experts, mental health clinicians, counselors, others who talk to students about things like anxiety, about things like depression, about things like what you do during the pandemic when you're cut off from your friends. So by the time we rolled Trails out, Mr. DeYoung, we had 2 years of laying the groundwork for saying in Pawpaw, we are going to do everything we can to take care of the social and emotional health of our children. Now, Trails was brought to us by the Van Buren ISD. It was brought to us in a partnership that they made with the University of Michigan. And I understand that there is some controversy. In fact, I talked with some folks recently to make sure I understood what the misunderstanding was here. But my criticism of the way that Gobles rolled this out is that they didn't spend 3 years doing it. We're building knowledge. We're making people understand what it means to try to provide through social emotional learning. The things that are controversial about Trails, I believe, at least in terms of what I've seen, I've not been deep in the weeds in the discussion in this district. But what I believe, based on what I've seen, is folks don't understand that Trails has 2 components. There's a tier 1 classroom-based everyday component, and then there's a component that is specific to the work of social workers, behavioral and mental health clinicians, based on pull-out. Just like you don't go and provide physical therapy for every student because not every student needs it, we do have students who are struggling with things like anxiety, things like depression. And sometimes, typically when our students get into the secondary age group, those things have to do with issues of identity. For the last 3 weeks, I have spent much of my time at our middle school addressing what I call egregious behavior between students, picking on each other based on issues of identity. And for some of those kids, their parents are saying, help me please. My kid comes home depressed every day, my kid comes home with whatever. We need to have a full access to a full library of tools to solve any problem that comes up for any child or any family. But when it comes to the things that are controversial, what's misunderstood in this district at this point in time is those things are not coming out of the tier 1 classroom use side of Trails. Those are coming out of the clinical, behavioral, mental health side of Trails. And if you're using those materials, it's because you're in a pull-out group or because you have a specialist like you going to work with a kid on things they're struggling with. Parents are absolutely involved every step of the way. So what I want this district to know, and this is as a colleague, as a parent, as somebody who's doing this work in Pawpaw, please, and I appreciate that you stopped to make sure you understood the program, please understand the program before you make judgments about it based on half understandings. And I appreciate the action that's been taken so far to stop so that we can understand. Now again, if I'm getting at the controversial piece, I hope I am. If not, I hope you'll let me know.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just want to let you know, it's the luck of the draw. Mr. DeYoung had those 2 questions. so sorry about that, Joe. Your name came out, I had twice like that. Martin, my question.
If you and our other candidates are very evenly matched, what would be one distinguishing characteristic that would separate you and make you the best choice to be our next superintendent?
Thanks for that. That's a great question. I don't know the second gentleman who applied. I do know the first gentleman. He and I have been friends for decades now, and I understand that this board is faced with a very difficult decision. And so you're not going to hear me say one negative thing about a person I don't know or a person I consider to be a lifelong friend. So really, your question is about me and my qualifications. I'm a creator. I'm a problem solver. I'm a deep thinker, and I'm a connector. I'm a person who always looks for a better way to do anything in front of me. I'm very reflective on my impact on others. And when I look at systems, and I'm a very natural systems thinker, I look at those places in our system where a little tweak here or a major overhaul there can make a big difference. Change work is not easy work. And if this district wants to change, there is some very hard work in front of all of us. And I am naturally inclined to that work. I'm a systems thinker, as I said. I'm a stickler for details when it comes to the data that should inform and drive decisions. So I guess part of my answer to your question, Mrs. Martin, is to the extent that what this board wants to bring on is somebody who can lead change. And I'll say again, change work is not easy work. It's not popular work. Everybody says that they want change, but when it comes time to do change, that's a much different story. Change agents, again, I'll say, if this board truly wants somebody to lead change, change agents don't last long. They burn a lot of capital. They upset rocking horses. They make hard decisions. And sometimes they make hard decisions about people they care about, hopefully with people they care about. But if what you're wanting is that kind of leadership, that's the kind of leadership that I do. Like I said in my last interview, I was at the point of leadership in terms of changing the mascot nickname in Pawpaw. It's one of the hardest change efforts I've ever led. But I'm incredibly proud because every step of the way, we kept students and people at the center. We did it with ethics, we did it with values, we did it with mission, but it was hard work. And that's the work I want to do here.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Delmaker.
Tell us about a time in your professional life when you needed to be true to your personal integrity, even though there were or could have been negative consequences for you. In other words, tell us about a time when you had to stand up for what you believed in the face of opposition.
I didn't look at every face behind me, but there were a lot of faces I did see that I know. And for more than 20 years here, I was often the person who was tasked with carrying the hard burden. I was going to tell a story, I'm not going to tell that story. And I'm not going to tell that story out of respect for the person that is known and beloved by a lot of people here, so I'm going to tell a different story. When I went to Fendel, I went to work for one of the most respected superintendents in West Michigan. He's now the executive director of the School Equity Caucus in Lansing. He was my boss, my direct supervisor. And when I got there, I noticed that they were not paying close enough attention, in my opinion. That was my job as a curriculum director, to the performance of the English language learning community in that district. And I gathered my data, I paid attention, I talked to folks, I reached out into the community, I drove out to the migrant camps, I had meetings with the community, and what I learned from person after person was there was a surface level of attention at this group, and mind you, it's more than 30% of the district. But there was a deep commitment to, at the time. Nobody there was trying not to do a good job. but they really hadn't done the hard work. And I realized that I needed to put that in front of my boss in a way that really called into question some of the priorities we were making in terms of our teacher training, in terms of our budget. So I went into a staff meeting. It was a principal meeting. It was a district admin team, and I laid the issue in front of my superintendent and my colleagues on the administrative team. Now, it wasn't a surprise. It wasn't a gotcha, because they knew I had been looking at it. But I had to put the cold hard facts in terms of data in front of that team. And what ensued was one of the smartest and most capable and competent superintendents I've ever known, and me, across the table, dug in around whether or not we had done, were doing, and were going to do what we needed to do for these students. By the time it was done, he stood up and walked out. His face was red. Meeting was essentially over. And I went back to my office and thought, well, I might need to polish my resume. About 20 minutes later, he came over and he came into my office and he closed the door and he said, "That's why I brought you here. Nobody has ever stood up to me like that. It made me see what I didn't want to see." I'm glad that story has a happy ending. In response to that, we were able to direct a good chunk of professional development money to training our staff around working with English language learners. We did work to buy and bring curriculum in. I'm really proud of the things that we put in place in terms of programming and staffing. And now it's one of the hallmarks of that district. Before I left, I was asked to come to Lansing to present on the transformation that we had made in our English language learner at the yearly school improvement conference in October that year. It was tough. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burza.
How hard are you willing to push back against political agendas being pushed onto the students from either side of the aisle?
These are great questions tonight. Really appreciate it. The political winds blow. And unfortunately, right now, they're blowing people apart. And we cannot let that distract from our commitment to doing what's right and what's best for kids. What's right and what's best for kids is not determined by the politics of the day, of the week, or the month. What's right for kids we know is established in best practice. It's established in our relationships with those kids. It means sometimes protecting them from outside sources. The question I had from Mr. DeYoung is a great example of that. Some questions came up in this community about the value of the Trails curriculum. And I think that the district did the right thing to pause. I will do my best as your superintendent to measure twice and cut once, so that before we roll anything out, we will have done the due diligence to make sure what we're putting out, we've communicated and built like we did over 3 years of Pop-Up. But to just go away from a program that is speaking to the deepest needs of our students right now, emotionally and socially. Our students are hurting. Maybe you know this, I hope you do, but according to MyFi data, which is collected every 2 years in the state of Michigan, Gobles has some of the highest rates of suicide ideation. I think the highest in the county. I don't have access to all the schools. But it should be a concern. And to partner with the University of Michigan. Now, do we have everything right? I don't know. We're working through it. We're learning as we go, making decisions. But to pull it, because a number of parents are uncomfortable or don't understand, would mean to back away from being able to provide some of those things that we need. Now, if we back away because there's another alternative, and we could put that in place quickly, our kids need it. It cannot be determined by politics. It has to be determined by what's right. Now, I also understand politics. This board has to have the support of its parents, and this superintendent, whoever that is, has to have the support of the board. There has to be an incredible amount of trust. But I hope that decisions aren't made by your superintendent or this board based on the latest Facebook rant by anybody or a 200 post rant on Facebook, that we've done our due diligence, that we've looked at it, and we can stand with great rationale on the decisions we've made. That's not the political winds blowing. When the questions about critical race theory came up a couple of years ago, and that was something that we talked about the other day, one of the first things I did was I communicated to the social studies teachers in Paw to say, you might be hearing about critical race theory. It was mentioned almost 5,000 times on Fox News in that 1 year alone. You might have parents, you might have others asking about what's going on. I want you to understand what it is. Now, if you have any questions, let's talk about it. And then, I put together a meeting for the community. That meeting is online. Anybody can go right now and look at it. And what I did was I invited our social studies teachers and any parents. And I'll tell you, I personally emailed parents who had emailed me with questions and concerns about it and said, come to our parent session. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to be open and transparent. Now, we did that 2 years ago. We weren't reactionary. It wasn't that the political chain was jerked. I recognized that there was an opportunity for conflict, and I wanted to be ahead of it. Again, that's not politics, that's leadership.
Thank you. Ms. Phillips.
What is your capacity on special education and gifted education at all levels?
Again, I feel like I gave you questions to ask me. Thank you. Great question. Gobles Public Schools is in the best position of any school I know to meet students where they are and journey with them. And it doesn't matter if that student is a special ed student or a gifted student. My philosophy is you find out what your kids need. And by that I mean, what do they need to grow personally? It's a whole child question. Where are they performing well? Where are they performing poorly in terms of their academic readiness? You find out what that looks like. And then in those places where they need any kind of intervention, first of all, we try everything we can while those students are being evaluated, while those students are in our care, so that we know enough about, is this student performing poorly because they have a foundational gap, or are they performing poorly because they're an intentional non-learner? Is there some environmental thing going on that's keeping a kid from being able to concentrate and learn how to read, for example? You know your kids well enough to do that. Know your kids well enough to know if they're done with the assignment that you gave them that's due on Friday, they're done on Monday, because I don't want them sitting there for 4 days. I want them engaged and challenged every day. That's what I mean by meeting kids where they are. One of the most important things that we need to remember is that every single student is a Tier 1 student. There is no such thing as saying to a student, you're special ed, your needs are met down the hall. You're gifted and talented, your needs are met down the hall or somewhere else. It doesn't matter if that student's in 2nd grade or 9th grade English or a senior. Our job is to know that student and to get that student what he or she needs to thrive, whatever that looks like. And if you meet a student who's really low, you meet them and you journey with them as far as you can. And if you meet a student who's talented, you meet them where they are and you journey with them as far as they can. My job as superintendent is to make sure that we have the staff that can do that we're clear on our priorities, that our staff has the materials and the training they need to be able to do that, and that we've had such good communication with our families that there's a partnership between our school and whatever services we're providing for that student.
Thank you. Mr. DeYoung.
Sure. Not an SEL, not a competition.
The football question, I hope.
There are strong feelings for all candidates which would like to
Sure.
present challenges following this process. If you were superintendent, how would you pull everyone together as one family and ensure a smooth transition?
Yeah, I wish that this board could give this job to more than one person. That would be great. If I get that honor, the most important thing that I can do is be clear about the vision and mission that I'm bringing to the work. It is not about me. It is not about the position. It is about every single student and family here. So the most important message that comes out first is, you have a superintendent who is here to do the hard work that our kids deserve. Now, I don't believe that I'm the only candidate who's in this process to do that work, but I can only speak for myself. I think people will come together around the message of we're about kids, we've got hard work to do for kids, and we have to do that work together. I understand that if I were to be given this opportunity, there will be people who are disappointed. I understand, having been a leader in this district, I've made some decisions that have rubbed people the wrong way. That's leadership, I understand that. Because I'm approachable, because I hold myself accountable, because I have a long history with a lot of families in this community, one of the things that provides me is the opportunity to say, I am here for kids. I'm not looking for this job because I wanted a new business card, because I wanted an office, because I wanted a title. I want this job because I want every single student to have the opportunities that Gobles can provide. And when that becomes the message that goes out from my work, from my mouth, from the communications that I send out, that becomes the vision that brings people together. I can't speak for how some people will be disappointed to receive that. I can tell you my door will be open and they will see me working hard. They'll see the sweat. They'll see the dedication and commitment. And I'll let that speak for itself.
Thank you. Ms. Martin, a question.
Tell us how you get things done. How do you juggle conflicting priorities, projects to meet deadlines? How would you keep yourself and your leadership team accountable for results and follow-through?
So, how do I get things done? I spend a lot of time in process making a plan. And sometimes that process, and I should say that's the change and improvement work of a district, that's the systems work of a district. Like I said, measure twice and cut once. I spend a lot of time making sure I have the data that I need, that I have a really good read on whatever the situation is. I've involved as many stakeholders as I needed to have involved. This is not I didn't pull a sword out of the stone to come, save the kingdom. I need to rely on the experts in this building, the experts in the community. So I spend a lot of time in analysis, and I make a plan. And then when I make that plan, I create benchmarks for myself. So that if I were doing a big project, I would say, okay, today is March 8th. By March 15th, I'm going to be here. By March 20th, I'm going to be here. And I benchmark it out. And those benchmarks have measurements to make sure that as I'm making progress towards the work in front of me, I'm hitting the goals and the targets that I need. When it comes to getting things done in terms of the people work, there are emergencies that come up for staff and students and families. There are unexpected things that happen. A boiler goes out, or we have a week of snow days or something like that. And in those cases, I have a very clear sense of priority, so that when there is a choice to be made between a benchmark that I might have to push off a day or two or a week, and taking care of people, working with the team to do that, the choice is always to take care of people. People are our biggest asset here and our first and most important commitment. In terms of the leadership team, it's my job to provide guidance and clarity around the work that we share. It's my job to create an environment so that those leaders know they can look into my blind spots, and if they see something that I don't see, they can call it out for me and say, hey, Harbough, you're about to bump your head on that. Or, hey, Harbough, I think you're doing that wrong. And to listen to those folks. I need to surround myself with people that know that they can say that to me and that I'm going to listen to and trust. That work is not easy work. That work is important work. And finally, I'll say, when it comes to what this school is supposed to be doing, everybody has a stake. And if we have a clear sense of values, we have a clear mission, we have the guidance of a strategic plan, then the work that we're doing together is laid out. And that's some of the work I think that I'm best at, is really looking at the situation, making a plan, putting a team together, and moving forward on it. You're welcome.
Ms. Kalmaker.
You have a blank piece of paper, an $8 million budget. What is your leadership team look like?
Are you still treasurer? I'm going to write down blank paper. What does my leadership team look like? Well, that would about be double the budget of this district. So, the most important work we do is the work to help students make academic and emotional and personal developmental progress. And the best place that we can put that $8 million isn't farthest from the students, it's closest to them. So my leadership team, and by the way, what is the budget this year for Gobles Public Schools? $8 million, right? Every single staff person upon whom that $8 million is spent is part of the leadership team already. Every bus driver, every custodian, every food service worker is part of the leadership team. And I have to create a culture where somebody can see something and say something to impact the life of a child in a positive way. So let me say that. But if I were doubling the size of the staff, I had an additional $8 million, what I would look to put in place are immediate classroom supports, and then also expertise in both buildings that can help us handle both what I consider to be the crisis of the emotional state of our kids, and I'll use the word executive skills, this is 2 words. We have students that are having a hard time functioning, and so there is expertise that we can bring to bear that can work in classrooms, that can coach and teach. I would also put in place, and by the way, let me say, I appreciate the commitment already that Gobles has made to adding positions in both buildings that free up the principals to spend more of their time being educational leaders. The more that we can do that, the better. If our principals are able to be true educational leaders, that's a good thing. Finally, and how much of that $8 million I have left, it is in developing teacher leadership. We have teachers here with great ideas who need training, who need resources to be able to lead in the ways that they want. Great ideas that I've heard talking to teachers about things that we could add, programs, opportunities for kids. Again, you take that $8 million and put it as close to the kids as possible.
Thank you. Ms. Burza.
Where do you see yourself professionally?
You know, I laughed when I came in because there was some polite applause, and I realized the last time I got applause in this gym was when we had the faculty 8th grade basketball game when we were in 8th grade. I think that's the last time I blocked Greg Alexander's shot. We would talk to me for 6 weeks. I've had a beautiful, beautiful career here, and most of that has been at Gobles. And I've had a great career outside of Gobles for the last 8 years that I talked about the last time. The calendar says that I can retire in 3 years. The work is what's going to determine that. I am motivated by work. Now, I don't know if any of you got the terrible question like, what do you do with your free time? What do I do with my free time? I work. I read, I write grants, I design programs, I collaborate with other educators. You couldn't find a more boring person, I think, on the face of the earth, with the possible exception of perhaps my wife. She works harder than I do. So in 5 years, Mr. Burza, I will be working. And I will be working on work that provides me meaning, that I can bring my passion and my expertise to, and it will be in the service of others. Because that's how God made me. I am here to work to give my talent. I believe in the idea that to whom much is given, much is required. That's my life. I see myself coaching again. I see myself teaching in whatever way I can. I believe in whatever work a person does, there's a calling to it. I am called to teach. And as a superintendent, I will be a teacher as well. I'll be teaching the principals and the teachers and others. So 5 years from now, I'm going to be working. I would love to be working here, because if I am, that means we've made it through the tough 3 years of change, right? We're starting to have the kind of impact that 3 years will have. And now it's about really sharing and reaping the rewards of the hard work that came before. But 5 years from now, if that's not here, I will be somewhere doing meaningful work. I did not come here and apply for this position to leave here. I came here to give it everything I had, as long as I can be effective, and as long as the work is meaningful to me and to this district.
Thank you. We're about 35 minutes into the interview.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, I'm not military time, so that's 8:39.
That's right.
I think. Right, Des?
Yeah.
8:39. So a couple more questions. You know, we have time, and hopefully the boys are getting done over in Lawrence.
I told them they had better not lose tonight,
Correct.
because I want to see them play again. So I will take, anyway.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I want to see him lose tonight. Couple questions. This is kind of a three-part question.
Okay.
I would like you to define equal opportunity. I would like you to define equitable outcomes. And then which would be your priority?
So the third part is my priority. So my definition of equal opportunity, and of course there's a legal definition that folks in HR talk about, and as superintendent I'm responsible to that. But for the thought experiment we're doing here, equal opportunity means that every student has the opportunity to succeed, and in order to succeed is given equal access, equal support, equal resources, and some of that, that which is equal, in a classroom where you have one teacher and 25 students, it doesn't mean that that teacher spends, divides the 50 minutes by 25 and says you get 2 and you get 2 and you get 2. The teacher's job is to understand the needs of the student. Some students need 1 minute, some need 3, some need 5, and some need none, except for once or twice a week because they're so self-guided they get it. So equal opportunity means you get from the teacher what it is that you need to make as much progress as you can. The example I used to use with that is we have a supply of crutches in this building, and every once in a while I'll see a spare wheelchair here or there. A student has an injury, like my son had last year. He may need to borrow those crutches or that wheelchair. Not every student does. But for my son to get down the hall, or for another child to get down the hall, to be able to get to class on time, to be able to get all of the learning that's there for that child, we need to give that child those crutches or that wheelchair to get there. But you do not give it to a student who needs it. Equitable outcome. So I'm going to focus on the word outcome of that. And the idea is, and this is some of the parameters, and they're impossible by the way, established for us by the state of Michigan. One example is that every child will be grade 3 as a reader by the end of grade 3. And the idea is that that's an equitable outcome. We know that there are students who come into kindergarten a year or more behind. And to catch those students up in the first 3 years of school without a tremendous expenditure of resources is impossible without the commitment and partnership with a whole bunch of folks, including the home, to the extent that that home can. We don't get that student to that third grade reading capacity or competency without just a mammoth effort. And one of the things that I used to be, I go round and round with Steve Schmidt, who was the union rep in this building when I was principal. He would say to me, how is it that there's a Title I program in the elementary and you're not down there fighting to get some of those dollars for this building? And my answer was, every dollar that we spend on those young readers and those young learners comes back to us many times over when that student's sitting in your chemistry class in 10 years. So in terms of equitable outcome, if we want to get students to their highest possible ability level, then it does mean some uneven investments. It means providing resources where they do the most good. The other thing I'll say is, it is impossible for every student to end in the same place. There are students who are in this building right now who want to go out and be carpenters, or bricklayers, or welders. There are others who want to go to places like the University of Michigan Dental School. And every single one of those kids should have full and free opportunity and access to their dreams. And if we're providing that pathway for those kids, we are providing equitable outcomes.
Which one do you think?
Oh, that was the third part.
Third part was, your priority is the equitable outcome. To get all students, provide all students with the best success path forward.
Yes, because there are so many variables. Our job is to remove as many obstacles as we can. Our job is to partner with that kid and that family to know what it is that they want and can do and push them as far as we can with all of the resources and sweat equity and everything else we can put into a kid. That's my priority.
Thank you. So we got more questions. We got a little bit more time here. You left this district once before. What is the difference now for you professionally than it was then?
So when I left the district, I had the experience of being principal here for 6 years, and then a teacher for about 15. So I would say that as a teacher, I was really on top of my craft. As a principal, I still had things to learn. During my principalship, we had several changes of superintendent and several changes of principalships. The leadership team changed a couple of times, and I found that the role and the expectations of the principal also changed a couple of times. Also during that period of time, I had some personal changes in my life. And so when I left the principalship to go back into the classroom, it was to go do that thing that I was at the top of my craft doing, but also to allow me to put all of my personal energy into stabilizing my new family, because I had a change in my family, and also to stabilize my larger family because we had experienced tragedy in our family, and I was often the person that was having to lead support my family. So I did that for family reasons. And I went back in the classroom for 6 years, and they were unbelievably meaningful years. I am so glad for the gift of those years. But then it was time for me to go push myself again. So I went into central office. I had the opportunity in Fenville, and it was part of my growth. One of the things that I'm truly interested in is leading curriculum work and curriculum instruction work. And I had the opportunity to go do that. And so what's different about me from the time that I left to now is that I have built programs, K-12. At the time that I left, I had a real specialty and expertise 6-12, but now I would say I have that K-12. I have done my own research in publishing. I've had a chance to pursue some of my own other professional interests. I've traveled, I've lectured, I've done some really, really fun and exciting things. But it's the central office work, it's the leadership work that is different about me. The other thing I'll say is that it's not just professional, it's personal. You learn how to use an administrative assistant in ways that you didn't know. You learn how to network with resources in the community in ways you didn't know when you're first in. So all of those things. I also think that I know better how to ask for help. There was a time earlier when I was talking to Mrs. Martin, I said, I didn't pull a sword out of the stone. There was an early part of my career when I thought that that's what I had done. It was on me to, I think I'm older and wiser in that regard. So a lot. But at the same time, those things that have always been true are still true about me. I have never, not for 1 minute since I left this district, believed that there was a better place to send my kids to school. Not for 1 minute. Never thought about pulling them. I've always thought that it is my job as a parent in this community to send my best resources, my hopes and dreams to here so that they bring and offer to this community what it is they have to offer. I believe that's my responsibility. I still come up here and volunteer, as I said, so all of those things that were true about me when I was a young teacher or an early principal, they've never changed. My commitment and my belief this is the best place to raise your kid and your family that never wavered.
Thank you. If anybody else wants to submit a question, Mr. Krieger's over there, you can submit a question to him and we can work through that. We won't have a chance probably to get all the questions if everybody runs up at once, but we just got to get them through it and ask the right way, and that'll make everything better. Mr. Harbough, as we wrap up your interview tonight, do you have any questions for the board?
I do. And I'll ask the question, and Mr. Krieger may have some advice about how best to for the board for me to clarify that. So obviously I'm known to all of you in one way or another. And I'm wondering if there are any specific concerns about me as a candidate, given that you know me, something of my professional history, that I could have the opportunity to address.
So, I'm not from Gobles. I've been in this district, I've personally been in this district 11 years. I've had one other graduate from here. I have another one who will graduate, and I have a first grader. So, I'm invested in this district. I don't really keep about any of my children. So I have to pass, and I don't have to pass with any other candidates as well. So, for me, what I really tried hard to do is eliminate hearsay. I heard this, I heard that. I think for me, the question that came up a lot, and I don't put a lot of weight into it because it's something that I don't know about. And you did touch on it a minute ago when you said you were here as a principal for 6 years. I spoke with your district's Board of Education President, Mr. McNett, and my concern was your follow-through. And so what I was told by him in a lengthy conversation tonight just before the meeting, I was out in the parking lot for a while, the things you're really good at and you find are important, such as the mascot change, you hit a home run when you follow through on those things. The question that I would have, and you answered a little bit, and I wrote down here family reasons and such. As a principal in this district, why did you leave? Why did you leave that administrative role? And that was, I think you answered some of that in the question prior.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak to that. Earlier, I spoke about how I make a plan, and I spend a lot of time, measure twice, cut once, and sometimes that process is slower than folks want. And that would be one of the things that's different between when I was a principal then and now. I understand that there is a dailiness that needs, there is a level of output that needs to be there. I don't miss deadlines. That's not a thing. I do work sometimes, if it is a process-based project, slower than some people want. But the outcome is outstanding. And I stand behind it. Do I hit a home run every time? No. Do I bat 1,000? No, I don't. But I would put the work up against anybody. Now, as the second person in the district, the last two districts I've been in, my workload is established by the superintendent. And I work essentially as an extra arm for him in the districts I've been in. It's been him. And so in many ways, my daily workload is not determined by me, it's determined by the person to whom I answer. The other thing I'll say is that in both districts, I've been the compliance officer. So I have had to investigate, I couldn't count, 10 or 15 serious allegations that relate from everything to school violence, the potential for, to Title IX or even assault or sexual assault type behaviors. And when I do that, everything else comes to a halt. And I will take the time that it needs. So I have had to be late on some projects or push some projects back because I'm doing the work that is immediately important. One such event happened that took me about 4 weeks. And the district with whom I was working at the time, there were lawsuit allegations and everything else. And when I finally turned that work product in, the attorney said to me, "You didn't hit a home run. You hit a grand slam in the bottom of the ninth in the World Series. And you're down by 3. That's the work that I do. There are times when it is frustratingly slow for folks working on that, but the work that comes out is excellent and it lasts. This spring, this school district will celebrate teachers recognized in the Pride program. That's a program that I conceived of as part of the committee. The idea was mine. The work and design, all of the documents, the entire process, everything I created. It's now 20, 21 years later, and that's a hallmark of this district. I'm proud of the work I do, and that's why I take the time it needs to do it well.
Thank you. Any other questions?
You have family in the district. What steps would you take to ensure that there is no feeling of nepotism or favoritism or anything like that?
Thanks for asking that. I never once thought about that with regards to my kid, because I really want my kid to have the hardest walk out of anybody, right? That poor kid, his life will get much worse if I'm there to, but really the professional relationship that I have with Lorianne. So when I was principal, one of the things that was put in place was that she reported to, at the time, Tom Huff, who was the elementary principal here. He did her evaluations. And if there was anything that came up, a concern that was hers or about her that was union related, I didn't get involved with that at all. So there would be a wall between myself and the work that Lorianne does here. Earlier I was going to tell a story, but I stopped myself. When I was principal, I was of course involved in dozens of personnel decisions, things. I have never yet told her anything that she's not supposed to know about any colleague or coworker or situation that came up that was private. There are things that she read about online about me. There was a really nasty situation with the former football coach here, and I was called all sorts of names at the time. She has no idea and will never know the truth of the matter, because that's not her business. That's my personal and professional ethics. It has nothing to do with anything other than what I believe is right and wrong, and I never waver from that. superintendent. So there will be a wall, and her work here as a teacher, I'm grateful for it right now. You know, she has my kid in class. I'm going to be her biggest cheerleader, but there'll be a wall.
I can also clarify that. So, two of our candidates have relationships like that in this district. The board, many years ago, before any of us were on, a long time ago, set forth policies in Neola that talk about those things, conflict of interest and supervision. So, Mr. Harbough is correct. As a superintendent, he would not have a direct report of his wife. That is a conflict of interest. That is something that we'll have to talk about in deliberations about other candidates, conflict of interest. But we have policies on both of those things to protect us, the board, the district. Because listen, in a district our size, you're going to have situations like this. So, good question, but we have board policy on that. Thank you for your.
So I did one more quick question, and I have one more thing I wanted to say, and I want to be respectful of time. My question is, you know, I participated in the survey that came out before I knew I was going to apply for this job. And I indicated in that survey that I was ready for some significant change in some areas. And I don't know what all the board is working with in terms of the directive or the information from the community. But my question for you is, you're bringing a new superintendent on. How will you know? By what measure will you know that this new superintendent is successful? Immediately, and then as you move forward to set goals with the superintendent. What does success look like in this role?
So for me, this is a good question. First off, the contract term during negotiations will be a 3-year contract.
Okay.
That's standard for a first contract with the superintendent. Secondly, it's the change in attitude. That's what I'm looking for the most. You know, a change in attitude of just the feel of the district. And that's how, it's not going to be an immediate thing. So whoever our candidate becomes has responsibilities to their own district until such time, maybe May. At that point, we will ask that candidate to sit in with our superintendent for a term, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, depending on experience with the district, experience as a superintendent. We can't expect immediate change from our new superintendent tomorrow, next week, next month, 4 months from now. But I think with time and success being items we can check off that the community's asked us for on the board. You know, we've had that survey, and you know, you participated, many of you participated and said these things. And Mr. Krieger did a good job of putting in big words some of those things that are important to us: culture, community. You know, the financial piece, we're a pretty good financial piece. In fact, the best we've ever been. But the success of the attitude change, the students, the staff, that's going to be what I'm looking for within that first. You know, they talk about a 90-day plan. To me, a 90-day plan can be thrown out the window because it takes you that long to get with your shareholders or stakeholders and understand what everybody really is looking for. So I'm just looking for a change. And I think visibility was another big word in that pie chart. I think that's easy to do, to be visible, more than current. There's no hiding the fact we're not knocking Jeff in any way, shape, or form. The gentleman is a financial whiz, and somebody in the meeting the other day said he was brought here to do that, and he's done that for our district. He has saved us from becoming a consolidated school with Bloomington. We stand on our own now. Financially, we're strong. And the things that the community said in their survey that they were looking for are opposite of Jeff, and there's no hiding that. And we're not trying to say that Jeff done great things here. Just the next superintendent needs to be more visible, communicable to the community, and help everybody see what's going on. So that's for me what I see.
I agree. It's culture shift. It's communication shifts. It's
Mr. Harbough, we appreciate your time, and your interest in our position. If there's nothing else, Mr. Krieger, do you come up with any other questions we can have? Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity. I wish you luck.